So you have no doubt seen this woman on your For You page at various points today. That is Senator Katie Britt, the junior senator from the state of Alabama, who delivered the Republican response to Joe Biden's State of the Union last night. It was weird. But the part that was the weirdest for me, the part that was the most off, was this.
When I took office, I took a different approach. I traveled to the Del Rio sector of Texas. That's where I spoke to a woman who shared her story with me. She had been sex trafficked by the cartels starting at the age of 12.
So I immediately had questions. Who was this woman? How did she meet her? How did she get her to tell her this story? Also, she seems to be describing something that had happened over the process of years. She said that it started when this woman was 12, and she says that she's a woman now, so it seems that some time has passed. How much of this happened on the border? What country did it happen in? Did it happen before Joe Biden was president? Senator Britt, right after that, stated pretty directly what side of the border it happened on, or at least she implies it very strongly.
And we wouldn't be okay with this happening in a third world country. This is the United States of America.
All right, so there's the answer. It happened in the United States. Or did it? So I looked a little bit to see if I could figure out what Senator Britt was talking about here. And I found it pretty easily. Senator Britt has told the story over and over and over again since going on this trip. So all I had to do was look for details of the trip, see if there was any information about who she talked to, and if there was any more information about this case there. And I think I found it pretty easily. So in January 2023, Senator Britt, who had just become the junior senator from Alabama, traveled to southern Texas to the Del Rio district near the border of Mexico with two other Republican senators, Marsha Blackburn of Tennessee and Cindy Hyde-Smith of Mississippi. And Senator Blackburn had all of the information about it on her website, her senatorial website. During this trip, among other scheduled visits, the senators had what they described as a round table, although you can see it's not a round table, it's a long table on which they are sitting on one side of it. It's a press conference. They were there with a Fox News contributor, Sarah Carter, who often does sort of the xenophobic anti-immigration coverage, as well as a Mexican congresswoman who's become an anti-human trafficking activist, as well as this woman, who the senators identify as Carla Jacinto Romero. All I had to do was click on Carla Jacinto Romero's name, that hyperlink, on Senator Blackburn's page, and it took me to this. This is Carla Jacinto Romero's testimony to Congress from 2015 about her experiences in Mexico. And if you scroll down, you see it took place between 2004 and 2008. Now, I don't know what they put in the textbooks in Alabama these days, but Joe Biden wasn't the president of the United States in 2004 or 2008. He wasn't even the vice president of the United States. That wouldn't happen until 2009. In 2004 to 2008, the president of the United States was George W. Bush. Vice president was Dick Cheney. And none of that really matters here because these events didn't happen in the United States. These crimes didn't take place in the United States or even near the border. They took place in Mexico, in Guadalajara, in Mexico City, and other parts of Mexico. Does U.S. policy have a huge role to play in the Mexican drug wars? Do Mexican drug cartels get their weapons from the United States? Do they get most of the money that they make selling and transiting drugs to the United States? Absolutely. But this didn't happen when Joe Biden was president. It happened 20 years ago when George W. Bush, a Republican, was president. And Jacinto Romero didn't share her story with Senator Britt. Britt tells it like she's like sitting by the banks of the Rio Grande, like holding her hand, like getting her to tell her the story that she won't tell anyone else. I mean, that's sort of the affect that you get watching that video, right? This is a professional activist. I mean, I'm sure she went through the things that she went through. I'm not discounting that at all. And she's clearly a very brave person who has overcome a lot in her life. But she tells this story in public. This is her testifying in front of Congress in 2015, 9 years ago, almost a decade ago. This is what she does. She goes around and tells people this story. And she did it for the senators in January 2023. And yet this senator has gone around repeatedly for the past year and change telling the story over and over again as if this woman had confided something in her, and as if she was describing actions that had taken place on or even near the US-Mexico border during Joe Biden's presidency. I don't even know what to say except that is just fundamentally dishonest. It goes beyond misleading. She said it in the piece of the video that you saw before. She says, we wouldn't accept these things if they happened in a third world country. Well, they did. Mexico is definitionally a third world country because it wasn't aligned directly with the Soviet Union or the United States. And it is also colloquially a third world country in the sense that it is a non-English speaking country of the global South that is more poor than the United States on average, although it is actually better off than a lot of other countries, even Latin America. But that's neither here nor there. It didn't happen in the United States. It's not an example of something that happened recently, or it's not even an example of something that happened on the border. And there's certainly not something that happened under Joe Biden. So why would she share that story? It seems very clear to me that what she's trying to do is she's trying to create an association in people's minds between Joe Biden, the border, Mexicans, Latin, people of Latin descent, something like that, and sexual violence. That's what she's going for. And she's doing it on the basis of what you can only say is just an out and out lie. She knows that she knows when this woman's experiences happened because this woman has talked about them repeatedly. I'm sure she talked about them and gave very specific indications of when it happened at that press conference that she was at in Del Rio. It must have been very obvious to her at the very least that she wasn't talking to somebody who had recently been 12 years old. After I watched this, I looked up her spokesperson, which is never easy to find these days, but I found an email address for him. I sent him an email. I asked him for comment, if he could explain what the senator meant, if there was some other incident that she was talking about that I hadn't found. They haven't gotten back to me. If they do, I will update then. But for now, it just looks like she just got on national television and lied about something really horrific and really important, and for her own personal and her party's political gain.